Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of CGS Live, Houdini Special. My name's Daniel Hourigan, I'm the head of effects at CG Spectrum. And yeah, welcome to another week. Well, how's everybody doing? I've had an interesting week. I've pulled something in my back and haven't been able to walk for most of the week. So that's been fun, but I'm feeling a bit better today. I can at least sit at my computer. Hey Rizwan, hey Robert, first in, best dressed. New setup. Oh, you haven't seen the new room, Robert. That's right. I'm in this plywood box. Almost soundproof booth. Unless it rains, and then it's incredibly loud because the roof is metal. Um, so yeah, big news this week. Houdini 19 sneak peek dropped. Can't remember what day that was. October 14. Good night, Ash. How are you? Um, I don't know if anyone's seen the Houdini 19. I assume you all have. Yeah, this is my cabin in the woods. Yeah, it's my cabin inside my shed in my backyard. Log cabin. Maybe I'll get some antlers on the back or something. It's a sort of, I wanted it to be soundproof for recording streams and content for the school, but I also wanted it to be a kind of recording studio for playing music and just a kind of soundproof room that I can turn my amp up and not annoy the neighbors. So yeah, I don't know. Have you guys seen the Houdini 19 sneak peek? I think it's some interesting things. It's not a massive, it's not like loads of new features. Although the biggest thing is probably Karma. Is now out of beta. Hey Alan, watched the sneak peek a few times. Yeah, look, I think there's some really cool stuff. Um, Things that I'm just looking at the thing here. Here we go. Things that I'm interested in. I mean these things are cool, but I sang a song in karaoke. Great, Rizwan. That's great. Um, these sort of things I think are good because they improve productivity and make you kind of work a bit faster because you no longer have to create setups for these. But it's interesting to see how many I guess production type setups that are kind of standard across the industry get rolled into tools in Houdini, which is I think it's good. They're sort of they're watching and seeing what people are doing on in studios and on projects, and then turning them into tools to make it so that everyone can access them. I think that's quite good. It's not groundbreaking stuff or anything, but it at least means that new artists that are coming into Houdini or don't have experience with this stuff is kind of able to do things like this. Like this, this shockwave thing is not a tool. Like it's not a new process or anything. They've just kind of wrapped up a bunch of existing nodes into a tool, but it makes then doing that process, a little bit easier or a lot easier. This is a cool explosion. I don't know why everyone. I mean, I do know why because it kind of looks cool, but it's weird. It's weird to see these flesh-colored explosions everywhere. The subsurface scattering look. I just feel like it does look cool, but it's not realistic. It just is a weird kind of thing to do to an explosion. But it does look cool, and I guess that's why everyone does it. This looks cool, this simulation. I mean, this is just talking about the improvements to the debris source. And I think that's good. Now it accepts packed geometry, which should be much more efficient to work with. I don't know, until we get it, and we can do a little, take a walk through and see what sort of things they've changed on it. It looks like they're creating groups or something for doing, different emission. Yeah, I think the kin effect stuff is really exciting too, Alan. That is something that I haven't really dug into much yet, but it's something that I would really like to try. These sort of things, exciting. This previously was possible. You can see that that's just a locked node, so it's just, again, a little subnet workflow, but it means that you don't have to do that from scratch anymore, which is great. So volume deform looks like it'll be pretty cool. It looks pretty good. And then yeah, the rendering side of things looks great with Karma. Look at that. Even the viewport looks good. And then yeah, lots of updates to do with Unreal, which is good as well. So that's cool. More texture sheet kind of enhancements and things like that. Here's kin effect stuff. Yeah, this stuff looks really cool. I think doing things like this could be great, you know, especially when you're creating your own kind of shots. And the hair stuff seems really good too. Looks cool, but yeah, until we get it, you know, it's kind of hard to know. I'm interested in what's going on with these muscle kind of simulations, but you know, some of this stuff is a little bit beyond me as an effects artist. I'm sure I could learn it, but it's kind of like, you know, this stuff used to be kind of in the realms of the rigging department. I don't know if maybe it's usable enough or, you know, easy enough for someone who's not a rigger to set up. This stuff looks cool too as well. Any improvements to the modeling workflow would be great. Yeah, this is more like what you used to be able to do in, I guess you can do it in Maya maybe, but 3D Studio Max used to have tools like this, and it makes it kind of easy to do very specific radiuses, like, because it gives you the actual number. That stuff looks cool too. It'd be cool to play with that in Vellum. Vellum is the other thing that I'm excited about. The enhancements to Vellum grain collisions with GPU optimization, because, you know, that has always been pretty slow, especially when you get into the millions and millions of grains. It can be quite inefficient. So I think that's going to be pretty cool. You can see here 29 million in 18, 25 million in 19, and the time difference is huge. It's like a quarter, almost. 17 seconds a frame. It's great. So I think that'll be really good. And then yeah, all this Karma sort of stage stuff looks awesome. Something I haven't really invested time in learning yet, because it has been in beta and it's not really something that's used in studios, but yeah, I think it has a lot of potential. And there's another weird fleshy explosion. So yeah, I think it's exciting. I'm going to get it when it comes out. I'm sure everyone else will as well. But I'll go through it and start playing around with things. I don't know when it comes out. Maybe it's meant to be the 19th, right? So maybe in a couple of days. It's the 19th tomorrow for me, but I think it's the 19th in America, so I have to wait an extra day. Or Canada. Can't get that wrong. Alright, so enough jibber jabber about Houdini 19. I'm very excited, as I'm sure you all are. It's always exciting to get a new Houdini release and just see what all the new tools are. And realize that you have to relearn everything that you learnt before. That's the fun part. Alright, so I don't know, this shot is not particularly interesting. I'm a little bit kind of, I don't know what to do next with it. But I thought I might keep going with it just to kind of finish it off. I rendered out all of the components just as stills, just to see kind of what I had. And as we can see, it's kind of, yeah, you know, needs work. Have a break on you. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You know what's not fun about new Houdini releases is that when you're working in a studio, they don't update. So you can be like stuck on Houdini 18 or something for, you know, 6 months until, or more, you know, a year until they finally update to the latest one. Or yeah, it can be kind of annoying. Because updates, as you mentioned, Robert, they tend to break things. So you know, studios tend to lock Houdini versions down, software versions in general down, so that there's no update surprises halfway through a project, and you know, everything breaks. So you tend to be lagging behind, which is a bit unfortunate. Lava and fire under the RVD. Yeah, well, I think that could be cool. I was thinking steam maybe rising. I think, you know, one of the first things I might want to do is just maybe improve my RVDs, or they're not RVDs. These are done in using that technique that I kind of demonstrated, which Robert, incidentally, is the same thing that I showed you how to do for your thing. Is this point deform method, right? So we're not actually simulating these; they're just fractures that are then being deformed, which is good because it makes, you know, it makes changing this stuff really easy. So, you know, now we've got our base kind of simulation and we want to go and add more detail to it, then we can. You know, it's not that difficult to do. So let's go and see. I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna do anything fancy still. I'm just gonna use Voronoi fracture, but I'll probably increase the amount of fractures significantly. Let's see. Should be, yeah, not too slow. Yeah, that's right. I mean, all their tools and pipeline effects are, you know, or their pipeline, yeah, I said pipeline effects, pipeline tools and all that sort of stuff is all, you know, linked to that version. So it's a big, you know, it's a big deal kind of changing versions. So, I mean, it's, yeah, it's looking a little better with just more pieces, but what I'm going to do is probably go even more. So let's go, what do we got here? We got 10,000 pieces, so that's not that many. Let's go 50,000. Yeah, maybe. I don't know, you know, whether remote work will affect that or not, because you still have the pipeline that is built around those tools. I guess it, like, if you're freelancing and you know, you're kind of on your own software, but if you're still remoting into their studio, then, you know, you're still kind of constrained by the same things. I don't know, you know, some studios are different. Some studios will just change and adopt the new thing. They're usually smaller studios that can handle that and don't have like a super rigid pipeline setup. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it would be nice if all studios would, but yeah, it can be difficult, challenging. Alright, so it looks like we're getting some clustering anyway, but I think really what's happening here is that now whole bunches of pieces are just moving with these, you know, more simplified geometry that's driving the effect. We're getting more pieces that are sort of being affected by the same point. So it kind of looks a little bit like clustering, which is interesting. The other thing that we could do is, because we've got a kind of ground, it's got a bit of thickness, but we're just doing a scatter on the outer surface. So you can see there's no points in the center. And when we fracture that, it gives us this kind of extrusion to the middle. So just this straight extrusion. To get around that, to get away from that kind of look, we use something different. Use the points from volume, or we want to distribute these points through the center of the box. So putting a VDB in there and scattering them on a VDB, or I just use points from volume because it's all sort of wrapped up, ready to go. You just feed it the geometry, it converts it internally into a volume and then scatters points. I wish you could turn off the guide with this here. It's annoying that it's there because it kind of makes it hard to see your points sometimes. So just put a null afterwards. There we go. So that should be a good distribution, but you can see they're very ordered, so I'm going to jitter them, break them up. And now you can see we get points scattered all the way through, as opposed to that. You can see that line, that gap there. So let's see how many points we've got. 253,000. That's going to be 253,000 fractures. That's probably too many. Let's just go 0.25. 16,000. Let's try that. What do we have before? We had 50,000. Okay. So it can be a little hard to dial in a specific number. 31. Let's go 15. 74. That'll be fine. All right. Let's see the difference. Be a little bit slow. But still, like, the Voronoi fracture is, you know, is so much faster than a lot of other options. That's why I favor it. Even that, you know, that tree fracture in here. This is just Voronoi fracture, I think. Have a look. See if it'll play. Probably won't play now, but you can see my mouse hovering over it. That one, I think that's probably just Voronoi fracture. I don't know, it's hard to tell. Oh, it's not playing now. Come on. That was one thing I was hoping to see an update to, actually, was the RED material fraction node. I was hoping that that would get faster, because it's just so painfully slow. Alright, so now you can see that instead of straight extrusions, we still have a couple, but you can see a much more sort of, you know, sort of, I don't know what to call it, but, you know, much more angular shapes rather than those straight extrusions, because the points are distributed all the way through the geometry now and not just on the top and bottom surface. So when they're just on the top and bottom, they just extrude down to the middle, and where they meet, that's where the pieces end. But with them distributed all the way through, you get all these kind of different chunks. And it looks a lot, you know, it looks a lot better. But yeah, what we're seeing here now is, because of our low-res grid, we're getting this kind of chunking stuff happening, and it doesn't look that great, to be honest. So we could potentially maybe subdivide our grid, or remesh it, you know, add further. Let's just put a subdivide here, because we do have a solver. It means that, you know, any change we do above will have to be recalculated. So let's just put a subdivide in here and see what the subdivide does to our effect. There you go. So you see how that's now broken up that that chunking that was happening, that clustering. So let's just turn that down. You can kind of, you'll see it sort of change. So if you set that to 0, you see how you get that kind of less desirable pattern happening. But then as you add a bit more detail, then it starts to deform the individual chunks again, which is cool. Alright, I reckon 1's probably enough. But then I'm also going to do some clustering. So let's do an RBD cluster. And I'm just using this set to combine pieces so that it's going to fuse these, because we're not doing rigid bodies, so there's no glue constraints or anything, so it's just going to fuse these together and assemble them. We should see that in the point deform, although I'm not seeing it. So it perhaps is because of this recalculating name here. Let me turn that off. There we go. So the cluster kind of changes the name attribute, really. It doesn't actually fuse geometry together, it just messes with the name. And when I recalculate the name after that, it just breaks that, so it basically removes what that has done. So untick that on the pack, and then you get the clusters coming through, and you can see those now. So, you know, you play with that. The clusters are being driven by a noise. Let's go in and have a look and see if we can work out how we could potentially add some, I don't know, variation to this. So this is constraint geometry. Here's our geometry here. Geo-in. Weirdly kind of laid out. Okay. It's getting the centroid of every piece. It's also doing something to do with constraints here. It's getting the centroid of every piece. It's creating a cluster attribute and then doing a noise. It's actually a Voronoi noise driving it. So you can see when we adjust the scale settings, or the size outside, it is driving this V noise here, Voronoi noise pattern. So that's interesting. The clusters are actually driven via a Voronoi, which, you know, perhaps we could do a better type of noise there. Maybe that noise gives kind of very ordered cluster shapes. You know? Perhaps that's good, because then you don't get like weird overlapping happening with your clusters. Maybe that's why they chose that option. But as you can see, all these clusters do kind of look like Voronoi shapes. So, I don't know, maybe that's why. I'm not sure. Let's see if we can mess with this a little bit. I don't know what would happen. Yeah, probably, I don't know if I can just swap this out for another noise type here, because the arguments that it's expecting are just much are specific for that Voronoi noise. You know what I'm going to do? Because I know that this is kind of just messing with the name attribute, I'm just going to try and make my own and see. I might fail, but that's part of the fun. So let's see. We've got all these different pieces, and I'm going to maybe I'll drive this via a scatter from my original grid. Maybe. See, if I was to create an attribute wrangle on these points and just say at name equals, so s at name equals piece, so put this in inverted commas, piece, and then I think I want to use, so plus, so I'm going to add to this string. So I'm going to start off by calling them piece. And when I do that, if you just have a look at what that gives you, you get a point attribute where they all say piece. But then I also want to add the point number to that. So if I do plus at ptnum, that doesn't work. I need to turn this into a string. And this is currently an integer. So to convert an integer to a string, I think it is that. String to an integer. Oh, it's the other, that's the wrong one. I think it's the other way around. I to a. Converts an integer to a string. There you go. I to a. So I don't know, like integer to a. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but I always forget what these expressions are, but they're very handy, because you can see now when I do that, when I do I to a at ptnum, it converts that and adds it to my piece. So now I've got a name attribute for each point. And if I was to then attribute transfer that to my Voronoi fractured pieces, choose the name attribute. Ah, look at that. Because this visualizer is based on the name, I turned that visualizer on from the Voronoi fracture. So that's what's showing me individual names. Basically, it's giving me a random color for each name. If you have a look at the marker, it is doing random from attribute name, and it's a color type visualizer. So when I do my attribute transfer, I can see how that name has changed. And then when I pack those and do my point deform, I should hopefully see that happen, but it doesn't look like it does. So let's have a look and see what I've done wrong. I think maybe, so name string 1287. So I've got how many pieces here? I've got, before I do that, I should have like 74,000 pieces. When I do this, 74,000 pieces. So this name is not, I've got a primitive name here. So let's attribute delete that and see if it works. no pack geo. So I'll do my point transfer, and then I'll attribute promote. Looks like it has to be on primitive, so let's do point to primitive, name. 169 pack fragments, there we go. Hey, look at that. So now I've created my own method for creating clusters. And presently, I'm just doing it in a very uniform fashion because I've just scattered 169 points. They've got relax on, so it's very even. If I turn that off, I'll get now different sizes, so that's cool. Got some randomness, that's what I was hoping for. And you'll notice I'm actually still getting Voronoi, very Voronoi kind of clusters, because that's what, when you transfer from a centroid, it goes out until it hits the next one, and that's kind of how Voronoi noise works. Anyway, so I'm getting still very Voronoi shapes, and that's not what I want. So let's see, what could I do? What could I do? I could create my name attribute. So I've got these individual points now. And then maybe around that, I could instance. So let's do point replicate. If I do a point replicate, it allows me to put, like, it's as if I'm copying a whole bunch of, you know, points onto each point. I can just like copy 10. I have the option to choose a shape, so I could choose a sphere. I can control the scale. I can also add noise. So what I'm thinking is that when I do this, these can expand my clusters and also noise them up a bit. So when I do my point replicate, under attributes, I can turn on copy source attributes. So now you'll notice I have 138 name attributes, 138 unique names, so 138 points presumably. But then on my point replicate, I've got 10 times the amount of points, but still the same amount of names. So each one of these now clusters of points. Even though there's more points, they all still have the same name. So, in theory, if I then transfer from that, I'll get, see that? I get some more kind of wonky shapes because of that noise that's driving it. So, yeah, we could change the frequency of that noise, crank it up. And you'll see I'm starting to get some more interesting shapes in there. Like, you know, look at that. Crank the roughness. Play with that. So now I'm starting to get some kind of more interesting shapes happening. Getting away from that Voronoi, that very Voronoi look. But I'm still using Voronoi to do the base fracture. That's the kind of thing. So, you know, there are lots of ways of taking a pretty boring or, you know, humdrum Voronoi fracture and making it slightly more interesting. Trying to break up those kind of patterns. Now, we could also drive this point replicate via attributes. So we could go at p scale. I hope that, does it make sense? You guys following me? Fit at pt num. Oh, what am I doing? Random at pt num between. So this is a fit. This should be a fit 0, 1 because random always returns 0 to 1. Random pt num between 0.1 and 2. And that is going to affect my point replicate. So if I just crank up the points, I should be able to see. There we go. So you can see I've got some really small ones and I've got some large ones. So this p scale now, this random p scale is kind of affecting the scale of those. So we'll then get some large clusters and some small clusters. You can see I'm getting overlapping here. And that's probably what I want to avoid, because if you get overlapping, like that's... Well, thanks, Alan. That's good, considering the Houdini 19 launch video came out. Huge call. you can see, now I'm pushing clusters into each other, and that then is sort of breaking it a little bit. I think in the context of this effect, it probably doesn't matter. Also because of the distance from camera, it probably doesn't matter. These clusters are way too big, but that's something you need to be mindful of, is the overlapping is potentially going to cause some issues. So, maybe you just want to turn back the scale. I went to 2, so maybe, I just leave that at 1 so I get less overlapping. But you can see how useful the guide is. That's really handy to have that marker there. Otherwise, I can't really see what I'm doing here. And we could always change the base count, and that will give me, more clusters. Maybe then also play with things like taking down the amplitude or the frequency, or upping the frequency, so I get higher noise. So, I think it's a cool thing to play around with. You can also potentially, I don't know, what could you do? You could noise maybe the positions of these points as well. So let's just do a VOP here, maybe before the point replicate, and just add a slight noise to move these off the surface a little bit. Pause, add. So add noise to P, and then put that back out again to P. 3D noise, original Perl in. And you can see how that is moving those around now. And that might also create an interesting sort of effect. I don't know. It's going to change it, obviously. But what it also might mean is that if you take them off the surface a little bit, I reckon what we should actually do is make this a little bit deeper. What do you think? Should we go deeper? I wonder how that will affect things. I don't know. Let's try it. Let's go a little bit deeper. -0.8. Because what might be cool to see in this effect is, the road underneath. Because at the moment it's just like a black hole. There's nothing there. It's a very kind of thin surface. But it might be cool to have something under there so that when it gets revealed, when it cracks, there's something to see. Hey, Michael, how's it going? So we'll wait for this to refracture again. And this stuff is not just limited to this technique. This is good for RBD sims as well. These are RBDs that I'm creating. It's just I'm not simulating them. I'm doing a deforming trick. But you could do the same kind of clustering, or take this idea and create your own system for clustering and use it for RBDs if you wanted to. Yeah, there's lots of options. Let's keep waiting for our Voronoi fracture. Yeah, what time is it for you there? It's not too late, is it? Can't remember what the time difference is. Happy Sunday. I remember that much. I remember it's 1 day behind. Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Well, you guys, I've been here for a while now, but 6:30. That's all right. Yeah, I think I might paint the walls. They're a little bit wood, a little bit too wood. Maybe just a whitewash or something. Got to get some posters up. I don't know what happened to my Led Zeppelin and my Star Wars poster in the move. Somehow I've lost them. Very disappointing. I'll have to find them again. I've been using it for games since it's procedural. Yeah, that's right, Robert. I think it's a great application, to when you want RBDs but you don't want RBDs. You want the fracture but you don't want the the falling down and the simulation part of it, this is a really good technique for just getting a nice procedural crack. And, you know, you can just drive it by all sorts of things. Like we're just driving it by color to create the footsteps of the character. But yeah, whatever, you know. The cool thing is that, like I said, these are still just packed pieces. They can be then turned into RBDs. So you can start with a procedural crack and then turn it into an RBD. Yeah, right. Useful in games because of the size as well. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so this is what I wanted to see. Is see how now I have, because it was so thin, I was just getting these clusters that ran from top to bottom straight through. But now it's pretty subtle, but I'm getting this different cluster halfway through, and that's probably down to the fact that I moved these points sort of away from the center. By moving them up, then it's going to kind of do a little cluster like that across the top potentially. So, you know, probably the more I add this noise to it, or shift them away from where they should be, I will get more of those kind of, there we go, sort of half thickness clusters going on. So yeah, you know, it's another interesting idea. I don't know what will happen when we deform that though, whether they'll just all deform. I assume, yeah, they probably will just all deform. But you can see there's a bit more depth to it now. The sides are kind of a bit more chunky. Oh, look. That's not good. You see how we're seeing edges here? That's not good. That means that we're losing, like, the name attribute on one piece. These pieces on the edge here are, there's different names across the piece. That's not good. So what do we need to do? We need to work out, and that, you know, it's just down to this transfer. We're using points, so some of the points are getting, and you can see this blurriness here. So this blurriness is happening across a single piece. Let me turn on smooth wire. You can see this piece here. So it would be happening to this guy because he's got one name attribute on this side and another name attribute on this side. Not good. Not good. So what could we do? We could maybe put this in a for each loop. For each named primitive. Hey Vanya, how's it going? Glad to see part 2. Yeah, going on with it. I mean, there's not too much more to do in this thing, but hopefully we can add something interesting. I don't know why for each loops do this. I guess it's following that line. Yeah. All right. So what I'm going to do instead, I've got my I deleted my name. I need that. Come back. So I'll keep that. Reset. There we go. So now I'm working on a single piece at a time. I am going to delete that name inside of here, but I'm keeping it so that I can loop over names, so that I can go inside the loop and loop over each piece, but then I'm going to remove that before I copy the new one on. And we can see the problem here. So this is good. That was lucky. Chances are that it's not going to happen to all pieces, but it is happening to this one. So if we turn on another marker for name, make it a text marker, we can see this side is getting piece 480 and this side is getting piece 393. So what should we do? Let's see if we can attribute. So when we attribute promote, the promotion method is average to primitives. Oh, that's interesting. It does kind of look like it's gone away there. So if we come down here, yeah, that is interesting. I don't know why. Let's see if we can see what it looks like down here. So you can see this loop's going to take a little while because it's looping over 173,000 pieces. It's going pretty quick, but that is a fair amount to loop over. So it'd be good if we could avoid it, but it only has to do it once. What am I going to do? When you have a giant loop like that, I'm just going to set max iterations to be like 100. And that will give me 100 pieces. Even 1,000. It's looping over 1,000 pretty quickly. So you can see when I do that, I get 1,000 pieces run through my loop. Even 5,000 seem to loop pretty quickly. Even 10,000 is probably fine, you know, but it's just a way to kind of look at a slice of a large looping operation and still see, you know, a significant number of loops, but without having to see the whole thing. Unfortunately, it looks like they're all happening to the bottom pieces, but let's run this through and see what's going on here. So, point deform, see if we can see it. There we go, we can see it happening there. So, turn off connect inside edges, create name attribute, just gets rid of our cluster. What is happening? Ah, look at our name. Yeah, okay, so we've got 16 unique names. Let's put an exploded view down, because exploded view will also separate these pieces based on their name attribute. And yeah, it's getting all messed up. What's going on? Why is it doing that? This is where the real fun begins. Okay, so we don't have any blend width. We're doing it to points first of all. So this one has the problem as well. Piece 45, piece 345, piece 402. Have fun. Go paint your wagon. Thanks for joining me, Robert. You're like, problems with the name attribute. I'm out. See you later. Oh, look. So it wasn't happening in that other piece that we were looking at before when we were looping, but this one, look, does have piece 345, piece 402 after the attribute promote. What if we do, instead of average, first match? No. So that doesn't change it. But so what I'm thinking of doing here is this. I'm going to blast. I'm just going to put a 0 in there. I'm going to invert that and just keep the first primitive that comes across here. I'll do it after the attribute promote actually, because then it's just a single primitive name. You see that? So now I've got a single piece with a single name attribute on it. And then I'm going to just attribute transfer, copy, I'll just do transfer. It is proximity based, but that should be okay. The name attribute from this single isolated face with a single name onto this side, which has a mixture. But when I transfer that, you see what happens. It goes from piece 345 over here to just all of them being piece 402. And if I just make that distance threshold, or even just turn off the distance threshold, you know, or just ensure that it's very large, and that, you know, that will be fine. It will make sure that we capture all those pieces. It actually doesn't need to be that big because these pieces are pretty small. But now, we should see, and look, there are probably other ways of doing this, but, you know, whatever, this works. We can see that now we should get, if we have a look at our exploded view, aha, no more open faces. So there's probably some way of doing that in Vex, I'm guessing. May have done it in the past, so I just can't remember. But, you know, this is my kind of go-to method of doing things usually, is something like that. This is interesting. What am I seeing here? Just a weird viewport. So there we go. All fixed. Now I just have to run this loop. It's 170,000 times. This is why the cluster tool is wrapped up, you know, it has a whole bunch of processes in it. It's doing it a lot faster. So we could dive inside the cluster tool and try to learn how it's resolving that and then implement that in our workflow. But yeah, you know, let's see, 10,000, there we go, we've got 10,000 pieces. All right, so I'm going to turn off the max iterations now and just let it run. And it's going to go through. It's going to take a little while. But yeah, look, you know, this is the thing with Houdini. It's all just about, especially if you're creating your own workflows, it's about like doing it, seeing if it works. Often there's a problem, and then you have to kind of solve that problem or solve that kind of issue that you've created for yourself. It's a blessing and a curse in Houdini that you can kind of do everything and manipulate everything, because it's very easy to create broken stuff. So yeah, you know, it's important to kind of understand the basics so that you can really solve these problems. Hey, thanks, Craig. Nice to see you. Yeah, so, you know, I think it's, even though I didn't really need to do this, it's still a cool kind of thing to experiment with and to just try and think about interesting ways of creating, you know, clusters or creating these kind of interesting shapes. I like to use Voronoi because it's quick, so I often do have to come up with these kind of wacky methods for introducing a little more detail to it. Arguably, though, I have made this very slow, so, you know, maybe an RBD material fraction node might be just as quick now. But I don't know. I like the challenge in kind of trying to come up with these techniques. What are you excited about for Houdini 19, Craig? I think we talked a little bit about this in class. I think, hey, thanks, Craig. I think you mentioned that you were you were really enjoying Karma, and that's something I'm looking forward to getting stuck into once it comes out. I just hope it works, because I think I mentioned that it's something, it didn't agree with my graphics card. Yeah, launch video tomorrow. Hey, Reza, how are you going? I'm good, thank you. With a sore back, but I'm doing okay. Oh, look, we're at 45,000. It's still going. It's good. It's doing like a couple of hundred pieces at a time, and we can probably optimize this for each loop a little bit as well. But you know, that's not too bad. There may even be the possibility that we don't need to do it in a for each loop, but or maybe just a part of it in the for each loop. I don't know. Yeah, the launch video will be cool. I don't know what time it's at, Australian time, but it will be cool to get a run through on things. Yeah, the for each loop is great. It's awesome. You can do so much with it. And for this type of stuff, it's the best, you know, like where you want to isolate pieces and loop and do a process to them separate to doing it on top of everything else. Because sometimes you just can't. You just can't do the thing that you want to do on everything en masse. So you need to break it down and just loop over each piece. Once this is cooked, it would be a good idea to write it to disk, because it is so slow. Every time I open this file, that for each loop is going to run, and it's going to take, what, it's at 3 minutes 40 at the moment, and it's just not quite at halfway. So, you know, I would want to write that to disk as soon as it's done. 10 a.m. Cool. I will be awake. So yeah, you know, for each loop's awesome. I think I could potentially do another for each loop after this one, after I wrote it to disk, to then do like an interior detail process on the clusters. So I wouldn't be running it over all 173,000 pieces anymore. I would just be running it over the clusters that get put out, and then I could do stuff to those as well. So that could be interesting to play with. We're at 85,000. I think, you know, this for me, I'm gonna let it go because I don't want to spend too much time messing with it now. But this for me is an incredibly slow process that I've just made, and I'd probably be cancelling it about now and going, all right, let's try and make this slightly faster. I'm pretty you know, pretty impatient when it comes to setups in Houdini that aren't simulations. So if I see something that's going to take 10 minutes and it's just a SOP calculation, then, you know, I'm going to try everything to not make that happen. Sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you just have to suck it up and wait. But, you know, there's usually ways of optimizing things, and that is a long time to wait for a SOP calculation. So, yeah, I think it's good to constantly question and, you know, just go, okay, how can I make this better? How can I make this faster? VDB file, well, no, VDB, Craig, would only be used for volumes. Alembic for everything else, really. Hey, Alex. I'm working in Houdini. I'm waiting for something right now. That's why I'm not doing anything at the moment. I'm working in Houdini, just creating some VFX shots. So at the moment, I'm working on this shot of some test geometry that is built into Houdini walking across this scene. And this is what I got to last week. So you can check out the previous week's stream if you want to see that. But now I'm just working on adding detail to it, and I might get to doing some other effect as well. I don't know. I thought it would be cool to do, like, you have him step on a car or something. That could be kind of fun. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Craig, VDBs for volumes, certainly, but Alembic for geometry. Or BGOs if it's between Houdini to Houdini, but when we're going, you know, from Houdini to Maya, Houdini to Max, it's traditionally Alembic files. Alembic are good. That's all right. You know, don't have to watch them immediately or, you know, at all. But if you're interested, go and have a look. Yeah, Alembic is good. You know, it handles a lot of different types of geometry that other packages can't generally, or other file extension types can't. You know, FBX expects very kind of rigid scenarios to work, but Alembic can kind of handle changing point counts. It can handle just points. You know, mesh with just changing topology, so like fluid simulations, stuff like that. So it's really kind of flexible. Yeah, look, lots of packages now will take VDBs because VDB is an open source platform. It can be incorporated into other packages. Is stream will be on channel? Do you mean this stream, Alex? Yeah, and the previous one? Yeah, if you go, so on our CG Spectrum channel, if you go to the past videos, there's not many streams happening every week now, so you'll see it, like it's like the second last video that was up. So yeah, and you can have a look, if you go to the playlist, you'll see a VFX playlist, and you can have a look at all the past streams that I've done. So it's lots of good content there if you're interested in this stuff. Look, only 10,000 to go. So slow. Yeah, so I don't know. Alembics are great. I don't have to use them that often, except for when I'm exporting things to send to other people. But it's definitely the way to go for a lot of geometry caches. Come on. 3,000 to go. Can't believe how slow this is. It's a lot of pieces. I mean, you know, it's 173,000 pieces. It's a ton. So, and it's like, yeah, maybe I want to change that cluster now. It's too big, but I kind of can't, or I have to wait another 10 minutes. I really do want to, but I'm going to just cache this to disk because I don't want to have to wait for that again. Don't need to save frame range. Don't need $F in my expression because I'm only saving a single frame, so get rid of that. Whoops, plug it in. Save to disk. Please don't recache that. There we go. Load from disk. Alright, cool. Yeah, look, you know, some things they're just slow, and you just have to deal with it. You know, a lot of people complain about the slowness of Mantra and the slowness of Houdini. It's just something you kind of, yeah, you know, you get used to it. You just have to deal with it. So yeah, I mean, this is not my ideal look. It's kind of the fractures are a little bit, or the clusters are a little bit large. But, you know, you can see that it has potential and it has some interesting shapes now. Now, what I wanted to kind of, what I wanted to show you was with this technique, you know, you've done this procedural cracking setup that isn't RBD. But what if you then wanted it to turn into RBDs? These are already packed pieces. So, you know, we've got 258 fragments here. If I did just put them into an RBD bullet solver, we just plug them straight in. They're already packed. But we would have to choose, you know, what frame we want these to start on. For starters, let's just run it from frame 1 and see. You know, we're not going to get that animation, but let's just run it from that frame and drop them on a ground plane. So, ground. I'll put that there and I'll drop it down to 10. Oh, maybe too much. -2. Yeah, there we go. Alright, so let's just see hide crag. Let's just see what yeah, what happens when we do this. It's importing a lot of data. I wonder if, because inside of here is an assemble, and it could be renaming everything. I don't know. Something to be careful of when you use the wrapped up version of the bullet solver is that it does have a lot of things inside that can be, you know, maybe interfering with what you want to do as a custom setup. And you can see that this is taking, you know, a long time just to bring the data in, which makes me worry that it's trying to simulate 173,000 pieces, which would be slow. Craig, I love your Pyro lesson for next week class. Challenges computer resources. Well, yeah, look, I mean, it doesn't have to. You do need to be kind of, with volumes, you certainly need to be mindful of resources. Flip sims, volumes, they can be incredibly slow and taxing. But, yeah, I usually keep the resolution down while I'm setting it all up. When I mean down, I mean up, voxel size up. Keep that voxel size low, high. And, you know, then when I'm sort of happy with my setup and it's working, then I'll go and, yeah, up the res and hopefully, you know, it'll still kind of work. So it does say 258 pack fragments, so it's not, you know, it is the same amount. It's not renaming them. It's just, it must just be the huge amount of points that are making this slow. So if we look before the pack, 2 million polygons is pretty, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's really slow. Weird. Vanya tried sending me a message on Instagram. You can do that. I'll check. I don't go on Instagram much, but I'll check my messages. But you can send me an email to, let me put up a notepad. Oh, I guess I could have put it in the comments. Daniel Hourigan at cgspectrum.edu. Actually, it's changed. It's .com now. There you go. Hope you can see that. Yeah, I'll post it in there. Hopefully I didn't spell it wrong. There you go. If you ever want to, ask me a question, send me an email. Do you clip the frustum by grouping it with the volume from camera, deleting what is not of the view of the camera? Do you mean geometry, Craig, or volume clipping? No worries, Vanya. Yes, geometry, right. It depends. Sometimes I will, but only really if it's incredibly heavy geometry would I do that, or if it's an incredibly large set. So, you know, if you did have a massive environment, let's make one. And, you know, let's say it's 500 meters by 500 meter grid, and it's a very heavy. Let's do 500 by 500. That should give us 250,000. Let's go 1,000 by 1,000. All right, so that's giving us 1 million. Still not particularly high. And then, you know, I'll give it a mountain. Oh, 10. All right, so, you know, there's a very large terrain, and let's say that our camera was like here. Right? So, yeah, in that instance, I probably would, because I've got this, you know, this crazy large plane now, this large environment, and my camera is God knows where. It's in there somewhere. Let's find it. Camera 2. Where are you, camera 2? There you are. So, you know, I'm just focused on this very kind of small section, and I've got all this stuff behind. So, yeah, look, it is a good idea to clip that out. It's also a good idea to clip it out because you then know what is the important area to focus your effects on. So it's handy to kind of know where your camera frustrums are, because, you know, you could be adding effects over here which aren't necessary. I often do this when I have large point simulations as well. I'll clip them out just to be the camera, so it is super efficient. So, you know, I tend to use the primitive, what is it? Volume node from camera 2, and then use a group like this. So this allows me to create a density volume, give it a value. There we go. And now I've got my far and near clipping planes. Run that into a group. Keep in bounding regions, bounding volume. Must be selecting points. But then we should see, hopefully, if I get this right. Now we have dimensions down here. Let's go by size. Division size 1. Let's make this much larger. Can't really see anything being selected there. Oh, that's why. I need to invert it because it's a Houdini volume. It does kind of the opposite. So there we go. There's my frustum. So, you know, it's really kind of handy to know where that area is that that I should be focusing on. So something like that. You can also, in a remesh, so that's going to be very heavy, but adaptive, think... Oh, I thought this had a setting on it that worked from camera, but I'm thinking of something else. Or you have to just create that. I mean, this has options to be adaptive, so you could create the adaptivity yourself from an attribute. So, for instance, I swear there's a tool that allows you to do that, but turn off my Slack. Not active. Pause notifications. So let's see. What was I doing? I've got my volume here that I created. I don't want to remesh yet. So I've got my volume here that I created. You can also object merge in your camera as a reference position. So you go and find your camera 2 there. I'm just going to grab that, accept, transform into this object. Use the polyfill. Usually delete the use polyfill. I can't understand what you're saying there. Do you mean the delete has a camera bounding volume, or use the bounding volume? Is that what you mean? Maybe? Or is there a camera option in here? So here's my camera now, but it's just a position in space, really. So if you have a look at that, turn on point display, it's like it's a bunch of points. We've just merged in the camera icon, essentially. If I put a fuse down, there are lots of ways. You could put an extract centroid down, but a fuse will just kind of, you know, give me, hopefully... I thought it would leave me with 1 point, but it looks like it's not. So maybe I'll just do this instead. Extract centroid. I find the extract centroid node crashes quite a bit, so I'm a little bit wary of it. But I'm going to choose output points. There's no name attribute. Get rid of that. There we go. So we've got a point now in the center of our camera. If I attribute transfer from that, delete the group after grouping with the volume node, then delete the group. Delete the group after grouping with the volume node, then delete the group. Oh. Yeah. You mean like what I've done? Or do you mean something different? That's alright, no worries. Or do you use a delete instead of a blast? Is that what you mean? So group, then blast. I'm not sure. Anyway, attribute transfer from this extract centroid out, and if I use color to visualize, the distances are huge here, so if I do 100, you can see that. But what I'm gonna do, because I want this remesh here to be adaptive, completely adaptive, maybe I'll go min size and max size, and let's go min size 10 and max size 20. See what that remesh is like. Okay, so there you go, you can see, yeah, it's very large. But now we know that this has a mesh size attribute, or a min mesh size attribute, and a max mesh size attribute, which means that I could control these numbers based on an attribute, or there's also target mesh size. I'm gonna turn these guys on. And then I'm gonna set, first of all, an attribute called min mesh size. I think that's what it was. Let's see, min mesh size. I guess you could make it whatever you want. At min mesh size equals, let's say that one is going to be, actually this one will be max mesh size. So first I'm going to set the maximum size to be 20. And then on this side, I'm going to set the min to be 10. And so let's see what that does. I got to make sure that I transfer that min mesh size. Ah, actually, so I think, yeah, because see, I'm creating the different ones on each side, but that's not really the way that it works. So I actually need it on both sides. So perhaps there's a overall one that I can use. Maybe this target mesh size is maybe the overall one that I can use instead. So let's try that. Target mesh size. So I'll go target mesh size equals 20. And then from over here, I'm going to transfer a lower target mesh size. No worries, Craig. You know, this is good stuff. So, you know, it's all good. 10 on this side. So I'm transferring from one side, target mesh size 20, and then this red area is going to be target mesh size 10. Get rid of that min and make it target. And then let's remesh with that turned on and see what happens. So let's rerun that. I think it's working. You can see how that area there is more smaller triangles than it is over here. So let's adjust this. Make it, I'll make it 200. And we'll see this remesh recalculate. Yeah, there we go. I'm sure there's an option for this in some node, but anyway, this is how you do it yourself. Let's add 100 blend width as well, so that there's a blending occurring and the mesh size just changes slightly. And maybe, you know, we don't need it to go so far back because this is actually a really large distance. So, yeah, we could just do 50 to 100 like that. And if we have a look through our camera, let's make that target mesh size on this, the mesh size on this side 5. Or 1. The remesh will take, you know, slower each time. Oh, there we go. So you can see now a level of detail occurring where at the front we have much higher mesh size or higher resolution. And then as it goes back, it falls off into nothing. I mean, it doesn't look very good, but maybe for the purposes of simulation, this would be a good way to create a collider where you need more detail at the front. No worries, Craig. Thanks for joining. And I guess I could turn off these min and max size ones as well, because perhaps they're not needed now. I don't know if they're being used. Doesn't look like it, because we're overriding it. But you could just keep going with the target mesh size, taking it down until you get, you know, a resolution that you're happy with. And even this side, you know, we could take that down to 10. It just gives you that nice kind of adaptive control so that you can reduce your meshes to be, you know, slightly more usable, especially with large environments like this. Now you can see a little issue here where my bounds of my volume are right on the frustum, and it's actually just clipping it right there. So we need to expand that a little bit. Can we go ISO surface? We could try expanding this a tiny bit, but we could also do this after our group. We could do a group expand. Take our group 1. Base group is group 1. And then, oops, group name, we could just call it group 1 so that it just overwrites the group name. And then by doing steps, you can see how that's expanding it on the sides. So the number of steps is going to be the number of times that it expands across that geometry. And then that just gives us that little bit of extra buffer room on the sides. So you can see, you know, instead of it being right there, it's just expanded a little bit so that we can't see those edges in the camera view. So anyway, you know, this is handy stuff. It's not kind of off topic, but that's all right. Yeah, it's good. All good stuff. So yeah, it looks like this is pretty slow. I wonder, one thing that I should try though, whoops, is because this is animating, let's freeze it here, time shift. Just in case that was creating, you know, a slowdown with this stuff. It's still taking a long time. We could try, let's see, what's the scale like on this? Let's scale this up. Bullet world scale. This has a handy scale option on it to make the world scale of the bullet larger. And this is equivalent to scaling up your simulation geometry before you do a sim and then scaling it back down. It actually does it internally here. If you had a look inside the RBD bullet solver, went right inside, you would find a scale node, transform, right there. If you scale, channel scale. So you can see it's scaled up here by 10. And if you come out, that parameter here, hover over that checkbox, it's called use scale. So that transform is saying if this is turned on, take this parameter, which will be channel scale. There we go, scale parameter. So that's what that transform in there is doing. It's saying if that checkbox is on, apply this channel scale. You can see, set to 10. So it's scaling it all up by 10. We zoom out, you can see, well, actually I can't show you because it doesn't let me click inside of here with it being locked, but right down the bottom as well is the transform, scaling it back down to 0.1. So it goes up by 10 and then back down by 0.1, and it ends up being the same size that it was initially. Let's see if it makes any difference to the performance being bigger. I'm just wondering if like the collision, the intersections or something, you know, the collision padding of the geometry representation, the bullet representation, wherever that is here, I'm just wondering if that might be better when it's at slightly larger scale. I don't know. Oh, it's still very slow. So I'm going to try and just build this into a simple dot network, because there might be something in there that's causing it to be very slow. I don't know. It could just be that's what it is, but let's try. So RBD packed object. Long story short, you should never just accept that something is, you know, is the way it is. If it feels kind of wrong or slow to you, then you should investigate why and try other options and see if you can get it to be better. It's always good to try and build the most efficient things that you can. So let's go. We've got input 1 here, so we can go first context. Go. Now we can check the guide geometry, because I think I mentioned this once before, but when you check that option on the simplified one, it takes like just forever. I don't know why. On visualize, if you go show geometry representation, in here, it takes an unusually long amount of time, but in here, it's just, you turn it on and it works. And we can see that each one of those clusters does have a pretty simple geometry representation, because they are connected pieces that are kind of clustered together, so it treats them all as a single thing. Now, the intersections of these clusters may be the problem, that we have intersecting geometry here, and perhaps that is why it's taking so long initially. But let's now see how this one performs. Ah, look at that importing data. That rocketed through. Aha! And it's slow, but it's running. So that's kind of what I was expecting. You know, it's something weird in the wrapped up RBD bullet solver that was making it perform slowly. So we should see when it hits the ground, it'll start kind of all breaking up completely. There we go. Alright, cool. So we got that. That's great. We'll use this one, seeing as this one's working nice and relatively quickly. So what I was kind of thinking was, you know, we've got our point deform happening, we've got our animation of, you know, of Crag walking through. But perhaps we wanted to add a little bit of extra life to these pieces. Maybe we want to, you know, we just want some to kind of crumble a little more, or I don't know, you know, just want to add some RBD stuff to it. So you can always just do that. And maybe we take the time shift off and we create some sort of behavior where at a certain point these can turn into RBDs. So how are we going to do that? Maybe I'll do something like this. So they're packed at this point. I'm going to put a little box, or actually just a grid down here. Oh, actually, maybe a sphere. A sphere is easier to kind of position, use. It'll create like a radial type of effect. So I'm going to put this here, move it to the end here, and we should have a little like whiteboard of every time I use the attribute transfer for doing an effect. Chalk another one up, maybe over here somewhere. And I'm going to transfer maybe the active attribute. Let's try that. Attribute wrangle. At active, so I at active, make sure it's an integer. I at active equals 1. I at active equals 0. So it's inactive to begin with. And then we're transferring that active attribute on. It's on the pack geometry already. And we're going to expand this over time. So I'm going to choose active. And I'm going to start it at 0. Let's have a look at our animation. So where's our Crag? Up here. So, you know, maybe, I mean, we could start it from the very start, but I'm thinking maybe, you know, we started around, I don't know, 42. Let's see what that looks like. It's pretty heavy now with all these pieces, but let's see, 42. Let's start it there. So here's our sphere. Go attribute transfer, we'll set a key, and then go to frame 96 maybe. Maybe more, 120. I'm sort of not really caring about the shot too much at the moment, more just the technical exercise, but it's always a good idea to check your camera. So let's go to 144. This should be a bit more advanced. Oh, no. Okay, 120. And we'll expand this out. So if we have a look at our distance, you know, we're going like from here to here. It's not 25. 25 meters is from the center. So it's kind of like, you know, there's 20. So it's maybe 20 to expand to there, and then another 25 to 45. Let's try 45 in there. And I swear I saw that there was an easy way to do this. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I saw, what is it? RBD configure? I didn't know you could do this. I saw somebody had done it, a student had done this. I always did it the way that I always knew how to do it, and I didn't know that this node existed, but RBD configure to visualize the active attribute. That's handy. I used to unpack it and put a color down, because colored, you know, visualizing packed geometry sometimes is a bit weird and wacky. Doesn't work too well. But this is actually really handy. You know, you just set the visualization to active so you can see where that active attribute is occurring. So that's cool. But maybe I don't want all the pieces to activate. You know? Maybe I only want, like, pieces over a certain height to activate. I don't know. Let's put a wrangle down. And, whoa, okay. Let's say if p dot y, oops, dot y is less than 0 for starters, I at active equals 0. At p dot y. Let's check out the visualization. Okay, so it made them all inactive. Let's adjust it. If p dot y is less than 1. Interesting. Let's check out the geometry spreadsheet just to double check. Okay, so it's not working. Let's go to less than 2. Oh, actually, less than 0. Let's do less than 0. Less than 0 makes them all inactive. So actually, I need to go the other way. So let's do less than -1. Oh, there we go. Now we're getting some active and inactive pieces, a mixture. Check the scene view again. So these pieces down here now are inactive. So let's go -2. And then those ones should be all active again. Yeah, alright. So that's -2 is too far, -1 is too far. Let's try -0.5. I really want to see just these pieces that are kind of sticking up get activated. There we go. That's a little bit better. Although, the thing with selecting things based on height when they're packed is that it works based on the centroid. So, you know, it's kind of a hard thing to get it right. You can see that I'm getting some that are sticking up that have been deactivated as well. And all these ones are active. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the best solution there is. Let's just run it as it is without that height thing and see kind of what it looks like. So I'm going to go to my .NET, go to my RBD packed pieces, and turn on here, the RBD packed object, overwrite attribute. And it's override attribute from SOPs. So it's going to bring in, I'll get rid of those other two. It's going to bring in that active attribute, and they're going to be inactive at the start. Hopefully. So we should see no falling at the start. And actually, our simulation doesn't need to start until... So again, this is about being efficient. We don't actually start our transfer until, what, somewhere down here. So really, we don't need to start our simulation until frame 42. It's a slow simulation, so, you know, 42 frames is going to make a big difference. So let's do that. It's weird the way it's running. It's like it's just like jumped 3 frames ahead really quickly and then slowed down again, and I don't know what's going on, but what we should see, hopefully, is that as that active attribute transfers from that sphere, we should start to see these pieces falling down in a progressive fashion. So this activate, oh, there we go. See how it's now starting to collapse just from this edge? So we've created this effect of, you know, first the ground is cracking and then it's, you know, completely collapsing, which could be cool. But, and that's looking cool, I'm happy with that. But what I just realized is that my packed pieces, you'll notice they aren't animating. So they're not still doing the deformation. I need them to continue deforming as well. We need to see that we should be seeing this as well, this stuff happening. So we also have an attribute as well as active that we can use called Deforming. So I'm going to say if at active, let's just make sure it's I at active. If I at active, so it's just making sure that it's an integer, equals, let's say if I at active is less than 1, which means if it's inactive, if it's 0, it will be, so that will evaluate to true. If the active value is less than 1, I at deforming equals 1. So deforming is going to tell the packed pieces that they're moving, they're deforming. Their P position is changing, that means it's deforming. There is another one which is animated, which we basically don't ever use, because what that animated relates to, it's kind of confusing. You would assume, you know, if something's moving, it would be animated. But we have these two options. We have, if I revert this to defaults, you'll see them both there, animated and deforming. And same here as well. Animated, deforming, static, deforming, active, animated, static. Animated refers to transforms that have been applied at the top level, up here, all the way up here, which we don't do. You know, it's discouraged behavior to do that. So we don't use animated. Deforming refers to P position changes. So the P position is deforming, it's changing. That's what is termed deforming. So the deforming is what we want to use. First, I'm going to set I at deforming to be off. And what that means is that first I'm setting it off, but then I'm saying if the active attribute is 0, turn it on. And so at the start, the active attribute is 0, so it's going to be on until that wave from the sphere transfers on. Should see it now. Let's hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Oops. Come on. Turn off a node and on again to reset. Oh, looks like for some reason the cache is not cleared. I can feel this simulation is, or this scene now, because of the number of pieces and stuff that I've got in here, is just, it is very heavy. I don't know why. You can see this. Oh, this is why I turned it off. Yeah. But yeah, it's just, it feels very heavy and chuggy, so it's definitely too heavy for my liking, but shall press on. Alright, so we can see, I saw that move, that means you can see this stuff happening here. We should be getting our deforming happening. Cool. Oh, great. Thanks, Alan. I'm glad it makes sense. So we can see the deforming happening now. This is not the simulation, this is the deforming from Crag. So that's still being passed into the sim world, which is great. But then we'll also get this stuff happening at the back. So we've got the best of both worlds now. We've got this procedural cracking simulation, which is driving this initial kind of very sculpted and designed crack that we worked on last week and improved with some clustering. And then at a certain point, you know, doesn't have to be based on a simple transfer, but I like that because it's art directorable and it allows me to control timing and spread and all that kind of stuff. Now we've got nice procedural designed crack, and then RBD collapse, which adds that extra layer of dynamic stuff and a bit of realism, and you know, it's what the director wants, let's say. So that's what we have to do. So they're not like isolated setups where they can't be combined together or can't be made to work, you know, as a kind of whole destruction workflow. They can be worked together and just use it as part of a larger setup. So we should see these starting to fall soon, hopefully. I think I can maybe see it. Yeah, there we go. And then there's a ground plane in there, so these are going to fall a little bit, but they're not going to completely disappear. They're not going to keep falling, although that would be a cool effect as well if you had just a bottomless pit and these pieces just fell away to reveal nothing, or lava, like Robert suggested at the start, would be cool. But yeah, you could have these just fall into a chasm. In that case, I probably would deactivate the sides, or work out a way to only activate the pieces that had been deformed by the point deform. Although, actually, so there we go, we can see them hitting the ground. Sorry for jumping all over the place. So, you know, you can see that occurring now. But what we do have, which I think will be really useful, is we have our original color that is driving the whole effect to begin with. So we have this from the solver. So let's just use that as well to drive activity, or the active attribute. So we've got that. So we're going to do our wave as well. So we've got our sphere wave. But then just put a null down here and grab that original color. I'm going to blast away I'm doing at cd.x greater than 0. Here we go. Let's see, what am I going to do here? What I might do, I might actually put this at the end. Time shift. Because if I time shift this to the very end, that will give me just the whole animation in one frame. Like where Crag has been, so where he has activated pieces, or where the deformed pieces are. If we have a look, you know, down here, at frame 120, that's all the deformation that is going to happen by that frame. So that's what this red mask is kind of giving us. Then we can kind of use that to either go, maybe, what should we do? Got our transfer. Oh, could we do that? No. So we've got our wave transfer. We've got this that we want to use as a mask. Just thinking about the best way to kind of approach it. I guess what we could do is another attribute transfer. Can you email me the song that you sang? If you want to, Rizwan, I'm not super interested in listening to people's karaoke, but you know, if that's what you want to do, I'm not going to stop you. So let's see, we've got that. Do I want it like that, or do I want it like that? I'm not sure. Maybe that. I'm going to shrink it though, I think. So what I'm going to do is do a group. I'm going to do group by edges. I'm going to select a point group. Group by edges. Unshared edges. That gives me that very edge. And then can I use a group expand? Group expand, group. is there a group, the opposite of group expand? Oh, that's what I want to do. I can do negative. Okay, that's cool. Well, there we go. That's kind of giving me what I wanted. I don't even need to do that first group by the looks of it. I can just do that. Hey, that's cool. Alright, so that's kind of what I wanted. Although... I also want the very edge. So I'm going to take... Maybe I'll take this group here and make that a primitive group. And I'm going to group expand that one. Ooh. Oh, okay. So group 2. There we go. That's why it wasn't quite working. I think. Base group, group 2. Ah, here we go. So that's what I want to do. So now I'm going to do a group combine to get those two groups together. So I've got group expand 2. Oops. Group combine. Ah, merge. No. What do I want to do? Group. Alright, you know what? I'm just going to blast this to get that edge. Delete not selected. And then I'm going to take this one. I'm going to blast that. Okay. Have I ever used iMovie? Well, look, I have, you know. I've used it on my phone to do quick editing of videos. But it's, you know, it's not really a professional movie editing software. Although I think it's better on the Mac than it is on the iPhone. So what am I doing here? I'm going to say I at active equals... zero. And this one as well, just to make sure that I have the complete edges disabled. Oh, although, except I want to do this. Sorry, I'm just kind of, you know, thinking about it as I'm doing it. Delete. So this one, this is going to define inactivity around the edges. And this one is as well. And maybe I don't need this one, I don't know. But, you know, I'll just mess with it. And I can sort of, you can see how I can kind of take those areas out. But they're going to be transferring the active attribute. So it's not going to be animated. This one's just going to be based on proximity. But I can use that visualizer to see what that's doing. There we go. Alright. That's what I was hoping for. Just the centers. Just that center bit to be inactive. So you can see if I disable this, everything's active. But I want to just deactivate the outside. There's maybe simpler ways of doing that. I don't know. Kind of got a bit lost in the process. But there you go. You can see how when I don't have that portion, I end up with some active pieces around the edge. So by adding that little group in there, I deactivate those. Alright. Let's try this again. There we go. 14 minutes left. Hopefully this sim takes 14 minutes. By deactivating a lot as well, it means that the sim should, in theory, go a little bit faster. So it's always good to deactivate the pieces that you don't need simulated, or if they're like outside of the window or something, and you still need them there maybe for constraints, but deactivate them because, yeah, you don't want to You don't want to be solving stuff if you don't need to. But what I'm hoping, we'll see now is that, from the start, Crag walks along, deforms the ground, and then over time, as he's walking, that already deformed ground is going to crumble away. And now we wait. What are you working on at the moment, Alan? You do animation type stuff, right? I think that's what you said. You do a lot of animation. Could be wrong. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. Let's have a look. So we should be starting to see it soon. There we go. And here's that extra crack that we put in as well, I think, the one being driven by a curve. So, I mean, you could drive this whole effect with a curve as well, instead of using crag. You don't have to. If you wanted to do kind of ground cracking animations, this whole thing could be driven via an animated curve, the same way that I did this kind of, this extra fracture that's running out here. This whole thing could just be driven. It looks like it kind of has that feeling that it looks like it's being driven by a curve that's going. So you could animate a curve running from one side to the other, cracking the geometry, deforming that grid to displace the geometry, and then doing this progressive activation to create the collapse. And that could be, it could be really cool. And you can see it looks like we have a lot of pieces being simulated with some kind of complex clustering, but as we all know, it's not. It's only 200 and something pieces being simulated. They're made up of a lot of geometry, but really it is quite a simple thing. But from this distance from camera, it actually looks quite cool, And then you could go another step further, and because we know from making a mistake with the assemble, having the create name still turned on, that these pieces are just being held together by their name attribute being the same. So if you wanted to then break them into further pieces, all you would have to do is give them name attributes, and they would start to break up into smaller pieces. So that could be interesting to play with as well. That's what it looks like from camera view. Someone asked me in the comments as well about why I didn't use ambient occlusion for my shadows, my rendering last week. And I mean, some sort of ambient occlusion probably would help, but oh, okay, environment art. Oh, cool. I swear you said animation, but maybe you were just interested in it. Do a bit of everything. Nice. That's the way to be. Yeah, ambient occlusion, is a kind of fake shadow. It's faking, I guess, the shadow from an indirect sunlight or something like that. These cars have a shadow underneath them, and you could describe that as maybe ambient occlusion if you were looking to create a fake version of that. But when we're doing realistic lighting, we tend not to use ambient occlusion because it's not, it's not being generated by a light source. It is an easy way to get a contact shadow, but it's not necessarily the correct way to do it with realism. You can see these cars, look a bit different. They don't have that ambient occlusion look because the light is actually traveling underneath the car in some parts. You can see that sunlight there. So you know, adding ambient occlusion to those is potentially not, you know, not the right idea. Here as well, you can see no dark kind of shadows around the car. Yeah, okay, cool. Nice. Tweaking mocap data. That's kind of, yeah, my animation. You know, I don't do animation either. I just kind of take stuff and do things with it, which I think, yeah, you're right. The KinEffect stuff will be really kind of exciting. I've been doing some stuff, and maybe I'll show you next week on our group project Kong that I've been working on with a bunch of other students, and I've been doing some crazy kind of animation retargeting stuff to fix some dodgy animation, and maybe the KinEffect stuff will help with that. I'll have to take a look at it. So I'm going to just do a flipbook of this, and you could add colliders in here, you could add Crag in there maybe. I don't know if that would be necessary, but you could potentially do it. Let's add him in to this merge so we can see what it looks like. I'm just going to do a little flipbook. See the ground plane coming out. It's because I'm just merging this out using the .NET, and it has a star in the object, so I'm just going to do RBD star, and that will grab the RBD packed object from there. There we go. Now I don't get my ground plane coming out. Let's do a flipbook. And oh, you know what we should do? We should do a switch here. So we've got our simulation frame 42. I'm going to do a switch. Yeah. Oh well, that was different. That Vellum, that Kong project was a different Kong project. There's another Kong project which is our collaborative project. That's different animation of Kong fighting a dinosaur, and that one's ongoing. It has been going for a little while, but we're making good progress. It's slow. It's hard to do a collaborative project remotely. But yeah, we're getting there. Hopefully we'll be able to show everyone how it's going soon. So what am I doing? Here, I'm taking this point form result, and I'm going to switch to it before frame 42. So I'm going to say $f less than 42 is going to switch to the point deform version, and then at 42 it'll switch to the simulation version, so that now I can flipbook it from the start and have my sim start at the correct frame. Got my Crag in there. Okay, flipbook. Yeah, we love Kong here at CG Spectrum, apparently. All our projects seem to have Kong in them. No, that first project was for... It was for content for the compositing, the new compositing course that we run. That was to then be used as a project for the students to comp with. Compositors, you know, they generally are always looking for content, so it helps them to have, you know, a 3D project like that to composite, so they can learn about layering and, you know, the things that I talk about in these streams when we look at Nuke. So it's useful to have that content. See, it's a little bit hard to see all of this without any lights, because shadows really help with, you know, details, and yeah, you definitely can see that we need much smaller kind of clusters on this stuff, because you can see the way they rotate, you know, because they're such big clusters. They have really broad rotations. Kind of breaks the effect a little bit. But then we've just switched now to our simulation, so we should see Should start to see around 50 or 60 the falling. I'll just let this run until it finishes. Oh, there we go. Starting to fall now. It's important to flipbook things, you know, just so that you understand what's happening in your simulation. And, you know, flipbooking this and looking at this, you know, there's lots of problems that I can see. And I knew that the clusters were too large, but you can see their performance now is really kind of not as good as it was before when the clusters were smaller. But these huge rotations, which just look a little bit weird. But then you can start to see when the RBDs get activated, it actually, you know, it starts to look kind of cool. And this sort of stuff for me when I'm working is kind of the best way to work, or the most flexible way to work. I keep mentioning it, but it is important, you know, that I can design effects to look a certain way, because that's usually what's asked of me in a studio context. Is there will be a very specific note or direction or concept art or whatever it might be, or a dream from the director, or, you know, whatever, where they want to see something happen at a specific moment, and they want something to go in a specific direction. And if you rely solely on RBD simulations, or if you rely solely on simulations, you're going to be in a world of pain, because simulations can be tricky to control and to get specific things happening at specific moments, and, you know, exactly perfectly in that direction. So by adding in as much sort of procedural art direction as you can, or controls, it just makes life a lot easier and means that you can get the result a lot quicker. So it's definitely something to think about, working out ways to make stuff easy to control and easy to change and directable by lines or paint strokes, or, you know, transfers, things like that. It's all just about making it flexible and easy to change. You know, you don't want to build a system that just can't be changed because it's too complicated. If you tell that to a supervisor or a director, they'll just be like, who is this guy? You know, get out of here. So yeah, you know, look at that. Just collapsing too far ahead of him, so our timing is probably a little off, although, you know, he's kind of out of the camera, I think, by this stage, but probably just should back off the transfer so it doesn't transfer so far. But then the next step might be to then get little pieces breaking off. So maybe come up with some setup for transferring new name attributes to those pieces. Maybe dynamically in the sim, or maybe in SOPs. I don't know what the best answer would be for that. And then debris, you know, use the debris source. Maybe the Houdini 19 debris source would be cool to try out for this, so we can get raining grit and small pieces and dust and all that kind of stuff happening. But I think, you know, I'm pretty happy with that. In terms of a setup, the result is not, you know, I'm not completely happy with, but in terms of a workflow, I think it's a pretty good one, and has potential to be, you know, resolved into something that looks pretty cool. So yeah, hopefully, you know, that's helpful to you guys. Hopefully you can, you know, understand most of what I did there. I think it's, you know, there's a lot of kind of interesting things that I've done there with the name transferring and the clustering that I set up. So, you know, if you didn't quite follow it, maybe go back and have another look and just see if you can understand what I was doing there, because it is really kind of, you know, it's a good technique, and good to understand how this stuff works, so that you can just manipulate it and, you know, make it do what you want to do, instead of just relying on the nodes that are provided. But yeah, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the stream. I'm gonna go. It's 12:02. Time time for lunch. I'll see you guys next week. I'll be watching the Houdini 19 reveal tomorrow, or the whatever it is. And yeah, we'll hopefully, if it comes out and we can download it, we can have a look at it next week and see what kind of fun and exciting things we can do with it. Thanks, Alan. Thanks for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. And yeah, you know, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out. You can always post comments in the YouTube video. You can always email CG Spectrum if you have questions about the courses that we run. And yeah, you can email me if you have questions as well. So thanks, guys. It's been fun. I'll talk to you next week. Have a good week, everybody.